Is the data you publish on comparing male pay versus female pay on a like-for-like job basis?
No, Senator, it very clearly is not, and it doesn't intend to be.
So you could, for example, publish airline employees, and majority of pilots are men at the moment. Women are increasing, and a majority of hostesses are female, so it would show a skew towards the men, because pilots are paid more than hostesses.
That's absolutely right. That is the gender pay gap.
That's the point.
How is that the point?
That's what the gender pay gap calculates. It is not seeking to calculate a like-for-like comparison. The definition is, and let's say we're doing an average gender pay gap, it's the average salaries of all men and the average salaries of all women, and a comparison between the two. That is the simple, clear definition of the gender pay gap.
Isn't that it's not on a like-for-like basis? It doesn't accommodate hours, because men tend to work more hours and men tend to be in more dangerous jobs generally.
So our calculation seeks to allow for, it annualises part-time or part-year earnings to an annualised full-time equivalent basis, so that it does account and allow for the differences and make a fair comparison for people who are working non-full-time versus full-time.
Sure.
But that's very clear, but it is not a like-for-like comparison, and it doesn't seek to make that comparison.
We'll legislate this year to include gender pay equity as one of the objects of the Act, and a success will be a closing of the gap rather than expanding.
The gender pay gap. It is disingenuous to make gender pay comparisons which are not based on a like-for-like basis for many reasons. Men spend more time in paid work than women, and the difference is roughly the same percentage as the gender pay gap. It is disingenuous to take the amount paid for part-time work, project that amount as if those people were working full-time, and then make a gender comparison. It would be much fairer if the gender pay gap was separated into two categories, part-time and full-time, and then compared. We all make different choices about our careers and income for many different reasons. We make choices about how much paid work we do. We make choices about our professions, which can be a compromise between our passion, our personal interest, our commitment and our ambition to succeed, our potential and our choice of work-life balance. The gender pay gap could be left satisfactorily unresolved based on the concept of equal opportunity. We live in a world where we have freedom of choice. There are no widespread examples of people being explicitly denied the freedom of choice based on gender. It is illegal to pay men and women differently for performing the same job. The difference in earnings may simply be due to people having freedom of choice, and that choice being expressed slightly differently by each gender. If we take a more proactive approach and insist the gender pay gap must be resolved, then we could encourage women to spend more time in paid employment and encourage men to exercise more choice about their work-life balance. I refuse to accept the existence of the gender pay gap until the statistics are separated into part-time and full-time categories, until hours worked are considered, until I'm sure that statistics have been compiled fairly objectively, impartially, and to the highest professional standard. Successive governments have treated the issue of gender equality as if they have provided women a gender equality menu to choose from. Governments have been all too eager to accept assertions, no matter how apparent the flaws, in feminist claims. It is an open invitation to produce some highly dubious statistics, pick out the parts which serve women's interests, and watch successive governments legislate equality issues exclusively for the benefit of women. The Albanese government has committed to pay equity, equal pay outcomes, which means the legislation is successful women will be paid on average the same as men for working on average less hours. These events expose both the corruption which has always been at the centre of the feminist movement and the prejudicial failings of our own government. Why pursue the principle of equal work for equal pay when we live in a prejudicially blind society which could not care less what is fair and equal to men? The central characteristics of feminism have always been the wholesale exploitation of humanity's most fundamental prejudice for the exclusive benefit of women. The only outcome from this circumstance, every aspect of our lives will be configured to the convenience of women. Our mainstream society has refused to ask the most rudimentary questions of feminist ideology. Any question from members of the public have been met with a wall of silence. The dissenting voices of ordinary men have been ignored, refused, persecuted until they are silenced. The sum of all these things has meant corrupt feminist ideologues have dictated the terms of gender equality to men. Feminist ideologues have used the opportunity to pursue self-interest for women and promote disadvantage, discrimination, injustice and persecution against men. A feminist core leadership who never believed what they were doing was right, but pursued sexist hypocrisy for a century because nobody noticed or cared what they were doing is wrong. For a century, successive governments have legislated equality for women. For a century, successive governments have refused to apply the same concept and principles of equality to men. Having committed to pay equity for women, the Albanese government has failed to apply gender equality or equity to any aspect of men's lives. The Albanese government has reduced the concept of gender equality to a new low point where we are left with a retarded perspective on the issue. Gender equity means whatever the personal decisions of those involved, there will be equal outcomes. If gender equity was applied to our prison population, that would mean the prison population would be equally represented by both men and women despite the imbalance in crimes committed by each gender. There has always been a refusal to apply gender equality or equity to child support payments, custodial time spent with our children, divorce settlements, life expectancy, the armed forces, the trades and professions at the lower end of the pay scale, the homeless population, wartime casualties, higher education, suicide prevention, and many other aspects of our lives. The reason equality or equity does not apply to men is because humanity's most fundamental prejudice favours women. We are prejudicially blind to discrimination against men, and we live in a society which refuses to apply the same concepts and principles of equality to men. A society based on ever-increasing systemic discrimination against men. As the Prime Minister announced legislation to direct the Fair Work Commission to achieve pay equity, he was undoubtedly conceited in the belief he would finally earn his place in history. That may be true, but it will be for reasons other than the one he thought. Anthony Albanese lacks the insight to understand his own prejudice. He lacks the intellect to understand the concept of equality or learn the lessons from our past. He makes decisions based on what is popular. He lacks the conscience and character to make decisions based on what is right. He makes prejudicial presumptions about people's circumstance on outdated stereotypes based on their identity. Anthony Albanese is a sexist who has defined men as second-class citizens by his failure to apply the same concept and principles of equality to men, a betrayal of our most fundamental human rights. Anthony Albanese sows division, then claims he is the solution to a problem of his own creation. Anthony Albanese has set our democracy on a course of eternal division to serve his own eternal political interests. In world history, our democratic process has steered our political leaders towards a path they believe is right. A democratic concept which has delivered an end to slavery, apartheid, segregation. It has delivered our freedom of choice and our fundamental human rights. In more recent history, our beloved democracy has been hijacked to be exploited by some at the expense of others, to do what is popular at the expense of what is right. Our society and political leaders see disadvantage and discrimination faced by some, but are prejudicially blind to discrimination and disadvantage faced by others. The solution to these problems have been applied to some to the exclusion of others in a society which has refused to conceive the solution should be universally applied. Feminist ideologues are guilty of the wholesale exploitation of humanity's most fundamental prejudice to exclusively serve the interests of women. Anthony Albanese is guilty of the wholesale exploitation of humanity's most fundamental prejudice to create divisions which serve his political interests. I too am a compassionate person. I would like to see our modern society look after the sick, the poor, and the disenfranchised. I too want to see an end to discrimination. I want to see a society based on equal opportunity. I want to see a society which is tolerant, inclusive, compassionate, and forgiving. My only difference, I want to see the solutions to these issues to be universally applied.